Welcome in, Houdat Nation. It is time. And by time, I mean, do y'all realize that the regular season is upon us? It's Tuesday, leading into Sunday, which leads into week one of the NFL season. We just had, I don't really want to kind of rub it in, but Louisiana didn't do really well in college sports this weekend. Nichols lost, LSU lost, Southern lost. ULM won, so there's that. Hey, shout out to the University of Louisiana Monroe. Yeah, they beat Army, so 17-13. So there's that. One Louisiana team won. Hopefully that doesn't speak to the result of the New Orleans Saints weekend. And Tulane won, so there's that. But most Louisiana teams seem to be a little bit of a struggle bus in the inaugural weekend of college football. But hopefully, I said professional football, New Orleans Saints are going to come out and bring it and dominate. 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 Hopefully. So who that to those who are here? Go ahead and warn you, I have been having Comcast problems for the past few days. Hopefully it's not bad tonight. We'll see. If nothing else, we'll get the podcast recorded and then put out on iTunes, Google Play, Spotify, iHeart Radio, etc. etc. Not a ton to go over today because obviously we don't have a game from the past week. Usually the Tuesday episode will be the recap with film and analytics of the previous week, and then Thursday we'll be previewing the upcoming game with film studies, sprinkled in between on the YouTube channel. But we're not quite there yet. That gives you an idea of what we'll be doing next week. So once we get there, we'll get it loaded. Get some Hoodats to those who are in the chat. Hoodat to TJ, Lester, quick smooth with the Clippers, or quite smooth with the Clippers, rather. Still, Bill Sainz Garcia, Sunblood times 3. Nice to see you. Leak Goods, James Griffon, Be Kind, King Troll, Jermaine Rollins, Randall, Lance, Mr. Jeff from Use Batman, John Searing, Gotti. Good to see you, Mike, Paul, Mr. Jerry, everybody else. Welcome into the stream. Hope you all are having an amazing, amazing evening. And, we are going to get it rocking and get it socking like them rocking socking robots that many of you grew up with in your childhood. Because some of y'all are older than me, and that's okay. But not too much has changed since last time we talked. There were some slight roster moves, including one yesterday. The New Orleans Saints ended up waiving the big Mark Evans II offensive lineman so that they could sign Tommy Hudson, tight end, to the practice squad. That's kind of one of your main changes there. You've also had Traquan Smith, who is undergoing surgery, will miss week one of the regular season. Very curious to see if somebody like Jontre Kirkland or somebody like Shaquan Davis, etc., gets pulled up to the active roster to fill in for that spot. But the good news is it seems like Rashid Shaheed, Chris Olave, Michael Thomas, etc., will be on pace to be there and make it happen. And if they don't bring up somebody for Traquan Smith, then you still have A.T. Perry and Keith Kirkwood in the background as the backups to provide for that team. So still got that. Dondre says, did Traquan get cut? Absolutely not. In fact, it seems like the New Orleans Saints have doubled down, and I'm expecting a press conference soon to announce that Traquan Smith has signed a 10-year deal. He's not going anywhere. He's going to actually play here till he's 40. So go ahead and get your Traquan Smith jersey if you haven't already, because you're going to get plenty of Traquan Smith in your future. I'm just kidding. That's not been told that. But I did get an email from the individual, the group that we buy our All 22 from, because obviously the NFL is sucky with it. So if y'all want to contribute to the All 22, I haven't bought it yet for this season, but I'm going to buy it regardless. But if anybody wants to contribute to that process, you can hit us up on PayPal, Venmo, Cash App. All of us appreciate it. So we can put out film studies this year. It is going to cost $80 for the season. Not up to y'all in terms of like covering. I'm going to pay it anyway, but if y'all want to contribute so we can do more film studies and support the channel, that is how you go about it. Also excited to do some giveaways again this year. So that's going to be a lot of fun too. So it's going to be a lot of, I'm expecting, I got real positive vibes about this season. Michael says, I'm really worried about the backup offensive lineman, and that's completely understandable. If y'all haven't, this is a great time to segue into our next topic. And the next topic is the first, and there will be more, but the first official depth chart has been released. And I will put it on the screen. I'm going to have to download it. Now, don't worry for those who are listening, wherever you're at, or you're not at the stream. those who are listening, I will rattle off the names. Nothing's really changed too much from the official or the unofficial ones from the preseason, but there is a kind of a slight change at guard, if you will, in that you'll notice on the sheet that every position that, coming in preseason had multiple players listed as potential starters. You still have that at one position. So here are your starters for the New Orleans Saints of the first official depth chart of the season. So we had some preseason ones. Now we have the official one. Your starting wide receivers are Michael Thomas and Chris Olave starting to split in, and flanker with Traquan Smith being listed as the backup flanker, Rashid Shaheed being the backup split in, but that's obviously not very accurate because Rashid Shaheed's going to be your slot guy. Offensive line is Trevor Penning, Cesar Ruiz at right guard, Eric McCoy at center, Ryan Ramczyk at right tackle. However, Andres Pete and James Hurst are listed as or in the starting left guard spot. So whether they've made the decision or not, they've not made that apparent to us, and they've not made it apparent to the teams that they will be playing, as they are still listed as either or. Personally, I believe that is James Hurst's role, but I've honestly been wrong before. So, I can't say with utmost certainty, but I will say that in terms of who I think would be more comfortable and who would be a better pairing with Trevor Penning, I would rather have James Hurst. And honestly, here's my logic behind that. Andres Pete, granted he is older now, but Andres Pete is the same style of player as Trevor Penning coming into the league. Very, very physical, very, very just hog molly dominant type of player that lacked in technique and needed to improve on technique the later he got into his career. Andres Pete never got amazing at technique, but he did get good. And when Andres Pete was healthy-ish and was in his prime, he was a Pro Bowl level player. And Trevor Penning hopefully takes a similar ascension. James Hurst is the opposite. James Hurst is not a physically dominant individual, but he's very technically sound. So he is going to get beat by people who are just better than him on some reps every now and then, in terms of just being better athletes, better physical humans. But he plays the game really soundly, and he's really smart with how he plays it. And I think that benefits Trevor Penning instead of having two similar size, like just, sledgehammers. You've got one a precision tool and one sledgehammer while you hope that your sledgehammer grows. So hopefully that analogy makes some level of sense. But anyway, we'll see who ends up being the starter. I think just for that alone, James Hurst is the superior option. But I think either way, you're in a good position at that one position at left guard to have a backup that is pretty decent. So we'll continue on down. We read off these other stars, and we'll get into the chat of what everybody really thinks and what everybody feels. Quarterback is Derrick Carr, James Winston. Taysom Hill is listed as third on the chart, but I think part of that is just the fact that Taysom Hill is needing a spot, right? In terms of like, where do you put him on the roster? I don't honestly believe Taysom Hill is going to be the third quarterback. I believe he'll be the emergency quarterback, and there's a slight difference there. I think that he's the emergency quarterback. For example, if you're in a game, I don't believe that Jake Haener is going to suit up. I believe that Jake Haener is going to be one of those that gets the healthy scratch on game day. So what ends up happening is if Derek Carr gets injured in the game, then that means Taysom Hill will be the backup to Jameis Winston. However, if you go a week, like Carr is injured and you're going into the next week, then I believe it'll be Jameis Winston followed by Jake Haener, because I think they want to use Taysom Hill on the field. It's not an opportunity to dog on Taysom Hill as a quarterback. It's simply that I think that New Orleans wants to be able to use him on the field, and you don't risk your backup quarterback by running the ball and throwing in the ball. And we've seen them do that in the past few years. So that logic kind of pans out what this regime is doing. So I think that he's the emergency quarterback, but I think that Haener's probably number 3. But because you're not going to likely dress Jake Haener during game days, because you usually aren't going to dress all 3, although you could, he's probably going to be your emergency guy. Or hopefully you don't have to call on his name, and that way you can take advantage of his great athleticism across the various positions that he plays. All right, let's continue on. The running back starting in Jamal Williams, Kendre Miller following up, and then Kirk Merritt. Do remember that. No Alvin Kamara suspension. No Alvin Kamara suspension. So yeah, got to wait for that. And then Adam Prentice. All right, defensively, that's all kind of set. We kind of knew this coming in. Carl Grander's going to be your starter. Obviously, Cameron Jordan, Nate Shepard, and Colin Saunders going to be there in the middle, right there, just beefing it up, being all beefy, being all sexy. I love it. Absolutely love it. I'm excited about this. I really am. Like, the reason I'm so excited is I haven't got to see like real dominant interior defensive line play in a while. And man, you saw so many flashes of it in camp and preseason this year. I'm really looking forward to that, hoping that ends up being the case. Good to see you pull my finger in, Hunter. Who dat to you? Those are coming on in. We're going over the official depth chart listed here for week 1, which obviously is not the end all be all, but I do think it says some things. So continuing on, we just got past the defensive line. Your backups are going to be Peyton Turner and Tano Passignon. And then finally, Isaiah Foskey lining up at the very end of that. Interior backups are going to be Malcolm Roach and Brian, the future GOAT Breezy. Hopefully, he lives up to the very wild expectations I'm placing on him. Linebacker is going to be Pete Warner, Demario Davis. Kind of ignore the Zach Bond Sam thing, because I would be really shocked if we see the New Orleans Saints playing like 50-60% base. They're going to continue to be a nickel team, though you will see a little bit more base if what we saw in the preseason lines up. And what I mean by that is, in the preseason, we were seeing anywhere from 25 to 30% of the defensive starters playing base, which is significantly higher than you saw last year. Still is not a majority amount, though. I mean, everybody out there is smart enough to do math, and 25 to 30% is not a majority. There's still going to be a majority nickel team. So your nickel starting corner is going to be Alontae Taylor, though the corners listed on the official depth chart are Paulson Debo and Marshawn Lattimore. Alontae Taylor is going to be the one starting in the slot, backed up by Ugo Amadi, who is listed as a free safety. So again, you take these official depth charts with a little bit of grain of salt. They're made to be very generic. Words are hard, and genetics probably are why I struggle with words. I'm going to blame genetics. But anyway, there is your full list of, your depth chart from the New Orleans Saints leading into this year. And Rashid Shaheed is, I know I've gotten several questions on this, Rashid Shaheed is listed as your kick returner and punt returner. Rashid Shaheed is listed as your kick returner and punt returner. So for those who've been questioning who's going to have that duty, looks like your slot receiver will continue to man that role, which I have no problem with. I think that he is probably talent-wise the best option that they have, though we do have a couple of young guns who I'd be curious to see have an opportunity to get in and kind of take that role. So that's where you are with the depth chart. I'm curious what chat says and where they feel. Crass says, better wrap up when tackling D. Henry. Otherwise, he's gone. Look, I'm not going to say that Derrick Henry's not dangerous, but we are long removed from Derrick Henry being arguably the best player in the NFL. And it's crazy, but he's a running back. I mean, that was 2020. This is 2023. I still think Derrick Henry is super scary, but if we play fundamentally sound football, we'll talk about this on Thursday when we get into our previews. I think the New Orleans have built their defense to be able to take on these type of running backs. That doesn't mean I think you're going to hold Derrick Henry to like 20 yards rushing on 11 attempts. I'm not saying that. What I am saying is I think that this team is building to be back to the team that made them really good. And when they were at their best, they were a great run defense team and a very good team against the pass, as well as a good pass rushing team. So that's what I'm hoping to say, or hoping to see moving forward. But yeah, I mean, when I look at the roster, I think that they are ready to handle that. We'll just have to wait and see if that ends up transpiring. And I'm also very curious to see what happens with Derrick Henry. I'm actually hoping for him to have a good season outside of the New Orleans game week 1 and next year, because I want him to reach 10,000 yards rushing. I know that might sound a little bit silly to some, but I mean, I'm one of those people that I enjoy watching players across the league, and there's some people that I just root for. Derrick Henry is one of those names, and he currently has got 8,300 rushing yards in his, believe it or not, pretty long career. It's crazy to think that he's been in the league this long, but Derrick Henry's already been in the league 7 years. That's wild. Already been in the league 7 years. To give you a reference, Mark Ingram, who just retired, has 8,100 rushing yards, and he played 13 years, and Derrick Henry's got 8,300 yards. So I would like to see him reach that 10,000, and I think that would put King Henry, as TJ, in my opinion, properly, monikers him. I would think that put King's Henry in the Hall of Fame, and I think that's kind of what I'm rooting for. He's a 3-time Pro Bowler, All-Pro, Offensive Player of the Year. I really think that he's been that level of running back that deserves Hall of Fame consideration, but truthfully, he needs another couple of good seasons to really solidify that in. So, yeah. And Breach, by the way, having a great question. Will we see more base defense to contain Derrick Henry? I think that you're going to see some early base defense. I'm curious to see what alignments they come out with, but Alontae Taylor is certainly not as scared of coming down into the slot and going in for a tackle. Now, if we look at the advanced stats from last year, now I know everybody's a big fan of advanced stats, but one thing that Alontae Taylor will need to do is the two players who led the team in missed tackles last year were Paulson Adebo and Alontae Taylor. So both of those guys are going to have to show improvement in this regard so that we have a little bit more confidence in them when it comes to these situations. At the same time, I'm not trying to say that as a negative, as in I don't believe in them. I actually do think that both these players, at least from what we've seen in limited views, have shown that they are continually ascending players and both getting better. But last year, Alontae Taylor had a missed tackle rate of 14.8%, and Paulson Adebo had a missed tackle rate of 13%, going by PFR/SIS's analytics. Bradley Roby ended up having the actual highest percentage, but granted, he wasn't a full-time starter, and he had 18%. That's another reason that he is probably heading out as well. But I do think that you're going to see that. The real question is, who do you end up putting in that spot? And do you trust Zach Bond to be that guy? Because we know Jalen Smith is currently sitting on the practice squad. And if I had to pick a guy that I believe is best suited for the New Orleans Saints to come in right now, maybe I'm wrong here. I'm not in the facility. Just because I had a background in scouting does not make me a know-it-all, because I am I get real humble because people say, like, Rev, you should coach. And like, yeah, I've talked to coaches. I don't think I'm on that level. So when I see this roster, I look like Jalen Smith should be the guy who's playing that strong side linebacker, but he's in the practice squad. He's not on the active roster at the moment. And unless they decide to throw in DeMarco Jackson, which this is an interesting point, because if you remember, I can put the sheet back up. If you look, behind Zach Bond as the starting strong side linebacker, they had DeMarco Jackson listed twice for both the middle linebacker spot and the strong side linebacker spot. So I'd be curious to see if he would come into that situation and maybe have an opportunity for those plays if they do more reps. And again, we're at the point of the season where it's week 1, and a lot of it's conjecture. I mean, we can kind of make educated guesses based off the preseason and training camp, but truthfully, we don't know. And if they're going to run more base, you would think it would be Zach Bond, but can't really say with certainty. There's a lot of questions. And even though I think that the talent on this roster, especially defensively, is going to be a top 10 defense by the end of the year, maybe top 5 defense, I do believe that the first beginning of the season, you're going to see some hiccups on the offense and hiccups on the defense, because there's some new things getting tried out and some new players in new spots. So just putting that out there. Gotti says, are you worried that the new aggressive style is higher risk / higher reward? Shouldn't we worry about gap integrity with that style? Yes and no. Dennis Allen, again, I know I'm giving him praise, and not everybody's ready to praise him as a head coach, but Dennis Allen has been here for, his 7th year? Is that right? 7th year with controlling the defense? That man has put out a top 10 defense basically every year since then. And his best years come when he's able to be aggressive with his play calling and aggressive with his personnel, because he can trust guys to be in island situations, whether that's Marshawn Lattimore, whether that was Marcus Williams in the day, which hopefully now is Honey Badger, etc. There's always going to be risk when you're aggressive, but at the same time, we talked about what used to make our offense so amazing. Well, hell, 2009, it wasn't that the New Orleans Saints offense was the best offense in the league, because I'm going to go ahead and tell you. Sure, they were great, but I don't believe that talent 2009 offense was probably the best in the league. But they had the most opportunity because the defense was extremely aggressive and gave the offense more opportunities to score the football. And I'm not saying the 2019 offense or 2009 offense was bad. That's not my argument, y'all. I'm just simply saying, was it really the best offense in the league that year? I mean, it was definitely in the top, but the aggressive defense, the turnover-happy defense, pushed them to another level. And I think that's what you would like to get back to if you really want to support Derrick Carr, if you really want to make some things happen that maybe, you're worried, how quickly are they going to get ready up and go? And I think that having an aggressive defense plays as a strength in this situation. And again, I feel like I worded that. People are going to be trolling me in the chat. And I do think that the 2009 offense was incredible, but I think what pushed them to that next level was the aggression of the defense. And you see this actually in other years. Go take a look at 2018. By the way, we talk about 2018, the year, I know we don't want to talk about the last game in 2018. We talk about 2018 as a whole. They were a phenomenal team. In fact, in terms of turnovers per game, they ranked 7th in the league in turnover margin. Well, 2018 is obviously a year that we did pretty well, right? Well, 2019, we ranked 2nd in the league in turnover margin. In 2017, the year of the great rookies, we ranked 9th in turnover margin. So I think that you do want to have a level of aggression. Now, I think good defenses have a level of aggression that will benefit the offense, but you got to have the talent to make that work. Talent both from the defensive coordination spot and talent from the players. So That's kind of the key for me is, will you be able to have that level of success? And kind of like what Mr. Don says, I don't trust Dennis Allen completely as a head coach, but I do trust Dennis Allen completely as a defensive coordinator. And when he's been at his best, he's been able to create turnovers and have that be something that we took advantage of. And TJ is right. You did have, Drew Brees throwing like, 6, 7, 8 interceptions in an entire season, and that helped out your turnover margin, but you still had a defense that was aggressive. Was it as aggressive as, the Baltimore Ravens? Yeah, I called them the Baltimore Ravens. No, but you were still aggressive. So certainly more aggressive than last year, which seemed like that team had to take a step back due to lack of players and injuries and waiting for talent to adjust to the defense. So True says you mentioned genetics, which brings the question up, why is there a UV index chart with precautions as far as what to wear and use with a time exposure warning? That is the most random question. I'm very curious why I read it. And I'm not a dermatologist. Go ask a dermatologist. Honestly, I'm just a hater. I'm a hater? Damn, Lame. What did I do to be a hater, Lame? What did I do to be a hater, sir? Oh, my God. What did I do to be a hater? Taylor says, hey, dudes, who's going to return kicks as punch right now? See, I told you we've been getting these kicks. Been told we're going with Shaheed. I figure wide receiver 3 is too important. Not to be offensive to Shaheed, your slot receiver is not too important to do kick return duties. And in fact, if you look historically with the Saints, I mean, they've been glad to use. I mean, Willie Snead would do those. Hell, Reggie Bush, who was mostly running back number 2, would do that. Go look at Deontay Hardy, who became wide receiver 3 and still had that responsibility. I mean, I don't think that wide receiver 3, the slot position, is too important to do that. Hell, Lance Moore would work special teams. I think, if anything, you see historically, at least for this franchise, that the New Orleans Saints do like to have a duplicity of roles when you are down the depth chart. And number 3 wide receiver is technically down the depth chart. So that is listed. I don't know if you saw it, but on the official depth chart of week 1, take it for what it is and grains of salt and all those things. But it did list Rashid Shaheed as the primary returner for both kick returns and punt returns. Pickens says Taysom should be QB2 on game day and Winston the number 3. This gives Saints an extra roster spot. Absolutely 1,000,000% disagree, because Taysom is arguably the worst quarterback on the roster. I think that he should be QB3, the emergency quarterback, but still participating in playing the game. I think that he should be the emergency guy. That way, if Carr got hurt and Winston got hurt, you put in him as the primary guy. But you want to have him on the field at tight end. You want to have him on the field in situations as the H-back, running the ball, etc. Yeah. That's what you want to do. I 100% would not have him as my number 2. No, I want it to be very clear that if Derrick Carr goes down, Jameis Winston's who's next up. That way we can focus on letting Taysom Hill be what he has been, which is one of the most electrifying X factors in the league. And that's not me being hyperbolic, by the way. I know you'll watch some of these other sports shows that are out there that claim to be analysts, and they'll just talk about some bullet points and hype up things that make no damn sense. They have nothing to back it up. But the reason I say that about Taysom Hill is because over the past 5 years, my man Taysom Hill has got over 40 touchdowns scored. There's only a handful of players in the NFL that have done that. He's done it in a variety of ways. So he is best on the field when he's actually out doing things. And picking again, I don't think that Taysom should be even looked at as QB2, even on a sheet. The dream of quarterback needs to be dead with Taysom. It clearly isn't going to happen. Don't even give the man hope that he's going to be the quarterback. Let him focus on being great at being a football player. Don't even let that QB2 pop up for him to go. And I do understand what you're saying, Pickett. I'm just saying I disagree with your logic. I disagree with your logic. So it's the same situation as, like, in recent years, Alvin Kamara was the emergency quarterback. But he played his normal role, but he wasn't listed as QB2 on the depth chart. He was the emergency quarterback. Same thing with Taysom. He's the emergency guy. He's not listed as number 2 on the depth chart. You roll with the quarterbacks that you have on the roster. So Hunter says, I could be wrong, but if you have Taysom on the emergency QB spot, it can't be on the field in any capacity other than quarterback. Also can contribute unless quarterback 1, 2 are injured. Well, yeah, the argument's going to be made, and this is going to be a gray area of what constitutes a quarterback, because he has a history of playing the position and using it as X factor. He doesn't really start at quarterback or play quarterback. And look, this is where you get into like debating stuff with the league. And I don't want to turn this conversation into that, but he is not listed as a quarterback for a reason. And New Orleans has skirted around those type of things for a long time. So anyway, I'm just saying, I think that Taysom's your number 3. That's the point. And that New Orleans will skirt around those rules by having him be a starting position player, just like Alvin Kamara was the emergency and still was on the field. So, Lane says, I hope Warner doesn't get hurt trying to tackle Derrick Henry. I mean, sure, I hope nobody gets hurt trying to tackle Derrick Henry. He's not exactly small. Derrick Henry is 6'4", 250 pounds. He's basically a linebacker. You know, it's just, that's a big man. For reference, Alvin Kamara, Kendre Miller, Mark Ingram, they're about 5'10", 215. Yeah, they are definitely smaller than Derrick. And one of the most amazing football pictures for me is when you see that Mark Ingram and Derrick Henry next to each other at the Alabama Crimson Tide football game, and you see how large Derrick Henry is in comparison. It's kind of scary, actually. It's kind of frightening. Isn't it? It's kind of frightening. Yeah, it's a big man. As a big man. But anyway, we have played Derrick Henry, twice so far? I think we played, actually, come to think of it, when we have played Tennessee, was Derrick Henry actually even active? That's a good question, y'all. Have the New Orleans Saints actually played Derrick Henry? Because in 2021, that's the last time, I don't think he played. And then the last time we would have played before that would have been, 2019? Yeah, you never played Derrick Henry. So you've never gotten to see the Saints go against Derrick Henry. So because of that, it's actually going to be the first time we see King Henry go against the Saints defense. So that's a little interesting wrinkle. Paul says Jalen Smith doesn't belong in the practice squad. Someone's going to snatch him off after week 1. Paul, you say that, but if he's going to get snatched, wouldn't he get snatched already? Wouldn't he got snatched already? So since New Orleans has never played Derrick Henry, it'll be very interesting to see. Now, keep in mind that I've been very positive about what the New Orleans Saints did to improve their run defense. And part of that was bringing in Colin Saunders. And I know for a lot of people, a one tech doesn't mean much. But if you watched last year's film, and we didn't do enough film study last year, we're going to be doing film study this year. It was very clear that our interior gap integrity and our interior ability to, influence the play at the point of attack was severely lacking, especially in run defense. And I think that signing alone has helped this team hopefully get back in that top 10, top 15 defending against the run. Just because just what y'all have seen. I mean, again, I can get too excited, and like anybody else, I have biases. But I mean, even y'all have been able to see the level of impact that he has had. And then also Malcolm Roach has really seen him taking a step forward as an overall player at the position. And I think that he's looking really good too. So I'm very confident that this run defense is going to be better. Do I believe they're going to be the best run defense in the league? I'm not saying that. What I am saying is that this team is certainly showing a trend in the right direction at that. And we'll see if that results in, solid play. As long as Derrick Henry's not breaking off 40, 50, 60-yard runs because of our interior integrity being off, that's fine. He can get 4 yards a run, and every now and then you stop him for 3 or 2, and that's okay. So we'll see what ends up happening. Obviously, Derrick Henry is an extremely dangerous man. It's the fact that he has that height, weight, speed combination, his size, his athletic ability is absolutely frightening. But it's kind of like a warm-up, right? Because if you remember, we got somebody in Atlanta who's not exactly small. But I will say that he's not as big as Derrick Henry. I mean, he's a big dude. Like Bijan Robinson, he's probably about 225, which is still about 15, 20 pounds heavier than most running backs. But he's not Derrick Henry big. So if you can stop Derrick Henry, you can stop Bijan Robinson, right? That's some simple logic. But just to remind you, last year, the New Orleans Saints rushing defense was 24th in yards allowed and 25th in attempts. So in yards per attempt, they were 20th. The New Orleans Saints need to get back to being at the top. In 2021, the New Orleans Saints were number 1 in yards per attempt. In 2020, they were number 4 in yards per attempt. In 2018, they were number 2 in yards per attempt. New Orleans has to get back to that. New Orleans has to get back to that. And this is one of the reasons that you go and get guys like Colin Saunders, and you're relying on guys like, and finding guys like Jalen Smith to make a spot for themselves in your roster to prove that there's some value and bringing back the run. And it's kind of like TJ says in the chat, remember that even though New Orleans beat Atlanta, hell yeah, remember what Cordell Patterson was doing. Remember, he's another guy that's about 225, playing running back last year for Atlanta. I mean, I think he had like 700 yards for him, 8 TDs. And he's close to a 1,000-yard season. But New Orleans struggled with him on the field. They did. And you got to hope that the changes that have happened this past, offseason are trying to fix that. Now, if y'all remember, I'm just going to give you a starting line. I went and pulled it up. Week 1, Atlanta Falcons versus New Orleans Saints last year. Sure, we won that game. That was a really close game. But he rushed for 22 attempts, 120 yards. That's 5.5 yards per carry, FYI. And that's freaking scary. Like, you can't give that up. You can't allow that to happen. He also went to have 17 attempts for 141 yards against Seattle 2 weeks later for 8 yards per attempt, which is pretty impressive. But anyway, so I'm very curious to see what it ends up looking like. So, yeah, we'll wait and see. Like, Garrett Wilson will definitely get more than the 70 prize picks projecting him against the Bills. 70 prize picks. Prize picks. I don't know what that is. Poor Rev's ginger brain is now confused. I don't know what that is. Okay, you think the offense starts out on fire? I don't think the offense starts off on fire, but I do think the offense starts off better than what we saw the first quarter of last year. So what I mean by that is, one, you have to consider the injury situation last year. But if you look at New Orleans starting off the season last year, like you actually go by their games and schedule and everything, I would say that the offense kind of came out really slumpy. So week 1, 27 points, you win. But then week 2, 10 points. Week 3, 14 points. And then week 4, 25 points. And then you had the big offense session in week 5 with Seattle. I think that the offense comes out and starts off better than that, but I don't think they start off like averaging 28 points a game. So to give you a math number, so if we take what they scored, it's going to see 27. You can't divide by 0. I know that was an accident. 27 plus 10 plus 14 plus 25. Divide that by 4. They're averaging 19 points a game. I think that this offense is closer starting off in the 23 to 25 points a game range. I don't know if they'll get to 28 points a game, which is the level that I personally set for an offense truly being elite in the league. And if you want to be the best offense in the league, you're averaging over 30 points. So, but I think that this offense, talent-wise and where they should be, are in the 23 to 25 points a game to start the season. I think that's kind of where they are average over the first 4 games, whereas last year they averaged 19 points. And if you can get to that 25 mark early on and work your way up to that 28 or even in our dreams 30, this is a winning football club. It's a winning football club. But last year, they obviously were not a winning football club, and a big part of that was the offense. And just to give you the very painful numbers, if you look at what they averaged per game, this is like really difficult because this is a low number of points forced just if you had a 16-game season. This is a 17-game season. They averaged 19.4 throughout the entire season. Usually teams, both offensively and defensively, good teams are going to get better on both sides of the ball as the season continues. The New Orleans Saints averaged the same amount offensively basically through every quarter of the season. They never got better. And we can talk about injuries. We can talk about play calling. All those things are true. All those variables are accurate. The point I'm making is if you want this to be better, if you want things to improve, well, you got to see at the start of the season, and hopefully that will then adjust your win-loss record. Hopefully. Might go to see why is Pete in front of Hurst in the depth chart. Technically, neither is in front of either. The depth chart was actually very interesting because week 1, it lists both Andres Pete and James Hurst as the either-or starter at left guard. Either-or starter, which is very interesting to me. And I'm curious to see who ends up actually having that. I personally believe that Hurst is the better fit, mostly because of how it helps Trevor Penning. I'm curious to see what Dennis Allen, Pete Carmichael, Curry, etc., the rest of the coaches think about that as we get going. So, Mr. Don says, although Olave is probably right, he's supposed to say that. He would never say the opposite, even if it were true. What are we referring to? I must have missed something. And I did. I missed something. All right. Mike says, don't call. Correct me if I'm wrong. We didn't score a TD in our first possession all season last year. We did not. I do not believe. Got me sitting here on the podcast, like trying to use my brain openly. Why would you do that to me, sir? I'm supposed to read scripted points and thoughts that I came up with before the show. Why do you have me thinking right now? You're a terrible person. You should be ashamed of yourself. But no, I don't think that we did. Because week 1 with Atlanta, I think we scored on our second drive. Yeah, it was our second drive because our first drive was wasn't a 3 and it was a 3 and out. Our first drive was a 3 and out last year because Atlanta scored a field goal, then we went 3 and out, then Atlanta went 3 and out, and then we scored a touchdown. So, because we had that 57-yard run by Taysom Hill or 58-yard run, whatever it was, that big run by Taysom Hill, the second drive. So I know that one didn't. And Seattle would have been another one that maybe we scored on the first drive, but I'm pretty sure we didn't do it there either. Anyway, our first 15 scripted plays have been pretty struggle. Yeah, last year against Seattle, we scored a field goal our first drive. It got closed down in the very beginning of or right down the red zone. So, yeah, Olave said the quarterback has much better control of the offense as opposed to last year. Yeah, look, I have nothing against Olave saying stuff like that, but I also don't think it means absolutely anything because that's what you're supposed to say. You don't come out and say, oh, well, I mean, that guy Winston really had it. You support your current quarterback. You know what I mean? So not that I'm saying I'm not even saying he's wrong. I'm just saying that you can't read into that statement. That's just a statement if you don't make, everybody's going to be like, what the hell? Why did you say that? Right? You kind of have to make that statement. So, what type of team are we? Run first or pass first? We are a West Coast offense, and you're going to see very pure West Coast forms, which is still a pass first team. However, it's definitely a team that relies heavily on the run, especially typically you're going to see a good amount of play action in West Coast offenses. You're going to see a few deep field shots, but most of the passes are going to be designed to attack the short to intermediate parts of the field. And New Orleans using its outside zone, inside zone running style is also going to be heavily utilized, but at the same time, you're going to have significantly more passing attempts than rushing attempts by the end of the year. So, with the only exception of that being if this offense comes out and just like for 3 quarters, just beating the ever-loving piss out of people, then the fourth quarter is going to be nothing but runs, and that'll offset the numbers a little bit. DePriest says, not scoring on first drive all year, a massive indictment on Carmichael. It is an indictment on their ability to pre-script the 15 plays leading into the game. But at the same time, we know that Carmichael, when he was with Drew Brees and Sean Payton, was praised for his ability to help with that aspect of game planning. So even though I do have issues with Pete Carmichael, by the way, those who want to contribute to the show, because I see DePriest and others, donate through Super Chats, PayPal, Venmo, Cash App, you can do that, and then we can also use that to buy the All-22 film so we can do our film studies with y'all this year. But I think that even though I do have Carmichael on my personal hot seat, like I really do want to see him be better by a lot. I really do. I also am not going to give him too much blame because he did have a talent deficiency last year too, and that has to be taken into consideration. This year, he doesn't really have that much of an argument, and we'll see where it goes. Technically, those first 15 scripted plays do include the first 2 drives. It's not usually just the first drive. And he did have success on a lot of the number 2 drives in last year, and we actually just talked about 2 of those games with Atlanta and Seattle where they did score in those first couple of drives. But I do think that we need to see it get to a better degree. And some of the things that need to return are we do need to see the crossover pattern that Michael Thomas was dominant in for years return and be a staple. We do need to see the screen game be effective again and be used again as a staple. We do need to see more misdirection, things like play action, which was a staple of our team. These are all things that successful teams are able to do because they understand their own offense, they operate well together, and they're fundamentally sound. Teams that aren't fundamentally sound can't add in more wrinkles because you're constantly having to slot in new players and new starters and stuff like that. You can't be as complex. So hopefully, because you haven't had, knock on wood, rub your voodoo doll, say your prayers, whatever it is you need to do to get the bad juju off your back, whatever it is you need, this New Orleans Saints offense is coming in healthier and more ready in a week 1 than they were last year. And Carmichael's included in that. So we shall wait and see how that translates. There are still lots of things that you got to fit in. How exactly is Derrick Carr and Jimmy Graham and Juwan Johnson and all that going to work out, right? Like the left guard spot we're talking about. Who is the left guard starter? Does the New Orleans Saints even know? And what does that translate to? Gosh, we only know, right? But a lot of things need to come into this season to show a stark improvement to what was there last year and what can make this team a successful team this year. And as much as we talk about them being 7-10 last year, and that is a losing record, I think most people look at last year's team and go, there was definitely more potential to be more than what they are. And I think the 7-10 record does show that they were a below average team, and I'm not arguing that, but I also think that they're a team that can move forward. So if you remember 2020, we were a 12-4 team. 2021, we were a 9-8 team. 2022, you're a 7-10 team. So that means over the past 2 years, you've been trending downwards. This is the opportunity to prove that you can flip that script and trend upwards. And if you look historically, I'm not trying to guarantee anything, but if you look historically, just look at the Patriots, look at other teams. When you lose a Hall of Fame quarterback, you are going to trend downwards. There is no denying it. It is a fact. You're going to trend downwards. It almost never happens that you can just continue trending upwards, losing a Hall of Fame quarterback and transitioning. Doesn't mean you can't still have a winning record, but it's going to be a struggle bus. And the same thing happened when Tom Brady left. Next year, Patriots were 7-9. Then they recovered and went 10-7. Last year, we're 8-9. So a little bit of that up and down for the Patriots and what they're doing. So you're going to have a little bit of that regression, but at the same time, you're expected to recover from that regression. You're expected to have found a quarterback or at least made enough moves to stabilize the position. You're expected to have rolled the roster and filled in spots that were hurting within those couple years and rebound. So this is a year that, in terms of what you have expectation-wise, this team should be a winning team. From the recovery of losing Drew Brees, and I guess technically you can include Sean Payton in there, but there really hasn't been a ton of change since Sean Payton left, except Sean Payton himself isn't here. That man's up in Denver, currently trying to revive Russell Wilson, and by the end of the year, he might have somebody else starting. We'll see. Rev over here with the hot takes. Just saying, I don't know, the limited Russell Wilson you've seen this past year, even though his workout videos look good and he's skinny, I don't know how confident I am in Russell Wilson at this point. Like, that man needs to really prove something. But anyway, yeah, this is the year you should see ascension and getting better. Also, shout out to Tajay Spears. I hope he doesn't have a great game Sunday, but I hope he has a great career and a great season. Let's hope. Michael Thomas seems like he should be good at 50-50 go route jump balls, but he hasn't been exactly that type receiver. He's been a get as open as possible receiver. Yeah, well, he's always been great at dominating zones, understanding how to create separation with his body, not with speed. You know, I think that if his foot really is ready, I mean, he can be a pretty good contributor on this team. And I'm not terribly worried about that. So Ted says, week 15 versus Falcons, we scored an open drive. Now, did we score a touchdown on the opening drive, Ted? That was the question, because we scored on the opening drive against Seattle, but it wasn't a touchdown. Did the New Orleans Saints score a touchdown in the opening drive against Atlanta? I don't remember us doing that, but we could have. And I'll actually go look it up right now just to kind of verify. So we played Atlanta, box score, because that was a 21-18 game. And let's see. Drive one. Yep, drive one. New Orleans Saints scored a touchdown. So I forgot about it. Good call out. Thank you for that, Ted. Yeah, week 15, we scored a touchdown. Andy Johnson complete short middle to Juwan Johnson. I'm sorry, Andy Dalton complete short middle to Juwan Johnson for 18 yards. New Orleans challenged at the runner, broke the playing ruling, and the original play was overturned. Andy Dalton was complete. So apparently they had ruled him short. They challenged and turned it into a TD. Good job, Ted. Good job, Ted. So TJ says 500-yard season for Thomas. I think Thomas is in the 700 to 800 yard if he's healthy and plays the entire season, and 7 to 8 TDs, and those are good numbers for him in my opinion. If he does better than that, absolutely fantastic. I would love that. Yeah, shout out to Andy Johnson. Wherever you are, sir, shout out to you, Andy Johnson. We'll always know the time that Rev ruined his own podcast. Also, just because I mentioned it, Andy Johnson played in the NFL as a running back for the New England Patriots from 1974 to 1982. But here's what's crazy. The man played in the league. This is wild, y'all. Check this out. He played in the league for 8 years, but only amassed 2,000 rushing yards. He actually played in the league for 8 entire years, 2,000 rushing yards in that time, and another 1,800 yards receiving. 3,800 total yards with 22 total TDs. Now, he did have a fantastic season in 1976 where he scored 10 TDs and had 1,000 yards from scrimmage. Do keep in mind that, there were less games back in the day. The old folks couldn't play as many football games as us young bucks. But anyway, man played 8 years in the NFL with only 2,000 rushing yards, which is kind of wow. That man managed to cash in some checks for a while. But shout out to Andy Johnson. There you go. That's going to be our new stick here on the show. Anytime we accidentally make up a player name because we mess something up, we're going to see if that player did play in the league and win. And they were a 5th-round draft pick in the 1974 NFL Draft, drafted 112th overall with the New England Patriots. Spent his entire career in New England and lived and was born in Athens, Georgia. And also passed away in Athens, Georgia. So shout out to Andy Johnson. Anderson Sidney Johnson was his full name, by the way. Anderson Sidney Johnson. What a name. Okay, back into the chat. Don says 500 yards would be a huge disappointment for Michael Thomas. I think it'd be a disappointment. So it just really depends. I mean, somebody asked earlier in the stream, I didn't get to read off the question, but they asked, what was your over-under on, Derrick Carr throwing for like 3,600 yards? Well, let's just say that Derrick Carr throws for 4,000 yards, right? I can't tell you what he's going to throw for. We do have a channel in my Discord, if y'all haven't seen it. We do have a channel in the Discord where we have Derrick Carr predictions. Whoever gets the closest for the Derrick Carr predictions is actually going to win some Saints merch. But we have people saying that he's going to have 4,700 yards, and some people saying he's going to have 4,000 even. That's what Josh did. Let's see, mine. I think I posted mine. What did I post? Did I actually post one? I don't know if I posted one. Let's see. TJ, did you post one? Yeah, TJ said 4,200 yards. So let's just say 42. I'm going to use that one because several people had several different numbers. Let's say, because I would definitely take an over. If he plays healthy and doesn't hit 4,000 yards, something's wrong. Well, let's just say 4,200 yards. If he has 4,200 yards, I'm going to say Olave is immediately 1,000. I'm actually going to say Chris Olave is 1,100 at minimum. Chris Olave is an up-and-coming, electrifying player. No offense to Michael Thomas, but I'm not going to start taking away from Chris Olave being freaking insane to give to Michael Thomas. Now we're down to 3,100 yards. All right, where else can we go? Let's start mathing this out. I actually enjoy this type of stuff. If y'all don't, I'm sorry. But let's go back to last year. Let's talk about running backs. We want to talk about the screen game getting back up and going, right? Well, last year, Alvin Kamara had 500 yards as a receiver, and that's with the screen game sucking. So let's just say running backs as a group. We're going to give everybody, running backs as a group, 800 yards. That's as a group. That brings us down to 2,300. That's as a group, by the way. As a group. So now let's talk about tight ends. Last year, Juwan Johnson had 500 yards and Adam Trautman had 200. So Taysom Hill was also there. About 800 yards went to the tight ends last year. We talk about the tight end group being better this year, which means that minimum you would assume 800 yards, minimum. But I really feel like Juwan Johnson has the ability to take a step this year and be in that 700-yard range. So I'm going to honestly say the tight end group is 1,000 yards. The tight end group as a whole is 1,000 yards receiving. That brings us down to 1,300 yards left. 1,300 yards left, and we still got to give Michael Thomas yards, and we still got to give Rashid Shaheed yards. And whether you like it or not, you got to give Traquan Smith yards. So you've only got 1,300 left. And you could honestly argue for more to the tight end room because West Coast offenses do love those short intermediate passes, like I said. So if Rashid Shaheed, who last year had 500, got 600, that leaves 700 for Michael Thomas. And look, y'all can say whatever you want about Traquan Smith, but he had about 300 yards receiving last year. I'm just saying, you have to, think about this when you're going through that. It's not just about Michael Thomas, what can he do? It's also about the rest of the team. So unless you think that Derrick Carr is going to throw for 5,000 yards, which I would absolutely be here for, it's tough to have multiple 1,000-yard receivers. It's tough. And again, none of what I'm about to say is about to trash Derrick Carr, but Derrick Carr has never been, even running a similar offense under Gruden, Derrick Carr's never been a 5,000-yard passer. The closest he got was 2021, where he threw for 4,800 yards. But over his career, he averages throwing right around 4,000 to 4,200. That's Derek Carr's average of what he throws. Now, a lot of that's going to depend on play calling and who actually, gives him the opportunity to make those type of plays, right? But that's never what he's been before. I'm not saying it can't happen. I'm just saying, like, if we're going to delineate some yards and figure out what the expectations are, I don't think it's realistic for Michael Thomas to have 1,000-yard expectations if you also believe that Rashid Shaheed's going to take off, and you also believe that the screen game is going to resurge back in the offense, and you also believe that, Juwan Johnson's going to be that electrifying tight end everybody thinks he's going to be. So I think at some point you run out of yards, and I think 700 yards for Thomas is about where I had him anyway, and I think that's fair. And we'll see how it ends up playing out, right? Who's going to have more yards, Shaheed or Thomas? I would say Michael Thomas. I'll say Michael Thomas has more yards simply because he's going to have more key situations probably given to him if he's healthy. If he's healthy. Now, the wild card, if you really want to get the wild card here, the wild card is, can you make Derek Carr throw for more than 30 touchdowns, which he's only done once in his career, and he did it in 2015. So the real question is, can you get Derek Carr not to throw 5,000 yards? Can you get Derek Carr to throw more than 30 TDs? That's the big one. And then how do you delineate those touchdowns? So, Mr. Don says, I think Michael Thomas is a dog. Get 1,000 yards if he's healthy. I'm here for it. The more successful Michael Thomas is, the more successful the offense clearly is. So I'm here for that. I'm absolutely here for it. Absolutely here for it. We shall see how it goes. I want it to happen. I'm just saying that I always try to be realistic in my takes. I try to be as objective as possible. I'm not saying that Derek Carr is bad, but I am saying that Derek Carr has played in a West Coast offense very similar to what he's going to have now under Gruden. Granted, he played with a way worse defense, all these other things. And he didn't put up 5,000 yards, and he's only put up 30-plus touchdowns once in his entire career. Do I think that he's going to put up 30-plus touchdowns this year? I actually do. I do believe he's going to do that. But do I think that he's going to throw 5,000 yards and 40 TDs? No, I don't. But if he does, absolutely incredible. Absolutely incredible. So, Don says, I think the T's and RBs will have fewer yards. See, I actually believe the opposite. I believe the tight ends and the running backs will have more yards than last year because Derek Carr seems to favor them. If you actually go look at his best year, go look at 2021. Darren Waller had like 700 yards. Foster Moreau had like 400 yards. Hell, we didn't even mention Foster Moreau as we were going through our numbers. But I did put him in the tight end group. Then you had Josh Jacobs and Kenyon Drake combined for like 700 yards. I mean, hell, he threw 100 yards to his fullback. Jalen Richard was catching passes. Peyton Barber was catching passes. So he likes his tight end room. Now, that doesn't mean he doesn't like his wide receiver room. But in his best year as a quarterback, he threw for 4,800 yards. He had one 1,000-yard receiver. It was Hunter Renfrow, and Hunter Renfrow had 1,038 of those yards. One thing about West Coast systems is it is built around spreading the ball. The goal is just like how outside zone likes to spread it for gaps in the front. West Coast tries to do the same thing. It's a lot of layered concepts. It's a lot of short intermediate and spreading the ball around and not relying on individual amazing targets. And you think you've seen that in his career. I mean, he's definitely willing to spread the ball around. And to TJ's point, if you go back to like the year before that, go back to 2020. In terms of who was the top receiver, well, Darren Waller, his tight end, was the only 1,000-yard receiver on that roster. Nelson Aguilar was second with around 900 yards, and Hunter Renfrow had 650, right? But Josh Jacobs had 250. Go back to 2019. Again, I'm not saying anything. None of this is a negative. I'm just saying that if you look at historically, he's definitely the type of quarterback that will use running backs and tight ends, where we talked about. Remember when Winston was going to be the starter, we talked, would Winston use the tight ends? Because Winston tended to favor his wide receivers. Well, Derek Carr definitely loves to give love to the tight ends and running backs. Clearly, he'll throw it wherever. I think, anyway, that's kind of where I'm at. Like, I think if things go how we want them to go, the running backs and the tight ends will have more yards and more TDs, not less. And I don't know if Juwan Johnson could be a 1,000-yard tight end like a Travis Kelce, but last year was 500 yards, and my hope and expectation was for him to be about 700, 750 this year. And I think Derek Carr is a great quarterback to help him get to that number. So we'll see. We'll absolutely see. You know, it just depends on who progresses, who regresses, and guess what? First game, NFL season, week 1, 2023. It's in 5 days. Sunday's going to get here before you know it, ladies and gentlemen. And on that note, we got to wrap it up because we've been going right about an hour. I appreciate every single one of you. Just a reminder, if you want to contribute to the channel, there's our PayPal, Venmo, Cash App links in the chat. We need $80 to pay for our film so we get our film studies in this year. Appreciate anybody who chooses to support. And if you want to support but you don't want to throw any money, because I get that. I'm just a random ginger. Why should you give me your money? Hit that like button. Subscribe if you haven't already. And we will be throughout the Discord all week. We'll be through on Twitter all week. And we'll do all the things. I appreciate y'all so much. Y'all part of the greatest fandom in all of sports. Who dat? God bless. Catch you on the next one. Deuces. That's me. And now we're going to wrap it up.